Right, so on that note, chat, welcome to what is going to be the rest of the stream. I imagine a lot of this conversation will make it to YouTube. But regardless, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. This marks now, as of about 25 minutes ago, the end of the MK1 online stress test, which was not a beta. It was the first preview online application, I guess technically like a closed beta, but with the sole purpose of, testing the online and online stability and stuff like that. Of course, ads will play on the live stream, so, for those watching on Twitch, I appreciate the patience sitting through ads whenever they do play, but obviously those of you on YouTube, it'll be a different thing. You won't be seeing it, whatever. Anyway, the test is finished. We were playing it for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all of this morning before it went, because it ended at like 4 p.m. UK, so we're playing it for the last like 3 or 4 hours. And all in all, both Ketchup and myself had a tremendous amount of time with the game. We played a lot of games. We must have played like a good 400 matches each, I would say. So a lot of time spent in the game, and with that comes a lot of opinions. We definitely have our points of view on the game, and some critiques, some praises, and that's basically what we're going to be doing. We're going to be having a long, in-depth chat about the game, breaking it down kind of mechanic by mechanic, talking about it in as much depth as possible, and just giving our 2 cents. So, of course, everything we're about to say is all of our just opinions. Nothing here is like set in stone, and the game is, pre-release again, as always. So, nothing here is going to be 100% going to be in the full game, as always. But, yeah, that's basically what we're going to do now. Chat about the game, and let us know if you've got any questions in chat, ask away. But, yeah, let's start this conversation. So, first things first, Ryan. Just overall generic thoughts. What do you think?
I really thought that there would be a situation now where maybe it would start feeling like a different game, because it's been over 10 years now since Mortal Kombat 9, and obviously for those that don't know, MK9 was the first game of like this new era with NetherRealm Studios, and this was the first time things started to be very different each time. So really, I thought it was going to feel like one of the previous games in some way. I think visually, you look at the game and you make a comparison to MK11. But I think that really comes down to, I don't know how much further graphics can get pushed. You know what I mean? Like, I really don't know how much further they can push the visuals. So visually, it looks like MK11, but gameplay-wise, plays absolutely nothing like it. But at the same time, doesn't really play like any of the previous games either. So you've gone into this as a brand new experience, and I think the mechanics and the meta of the game and everything else has developed a lot over even just the 3 days we had the test available. 3.5, I guess, if you want to be specific. So my first impressions is that it's incredibly fun, but at the same time, playing it, I don't think is the same as watching it. I saw a lot of people say this game looks slow and this game does not look very fast. When you're sitting down and playing the game, it feels completely opposite. Like, the amount of stuff you have to be ready for, the stuff you have to look out for, the game feels incredibly fast with that, because there's a lot of anti-airs you have to watch out for. You have to watch out for the stuff you can punish. Obviously, playing a solid neutral for whiff punish. The giant combos that you can pull off thanks to the cameos and all the wild stuff that people have discovered just in 3 days. From a mental side of things, you're playing stuff a lot faster, and it felt for me like 3 times
so
faster.
let's talk about this a bit, because this has obviously been, I mean, like, from a streaming perspective, this has kind of been the main question and the main thing that people have wanted to know, and I know there's a lot of other creators talking about it as well, is what does it feel like? Is it as slow as 11? Is it as fast as X? Like, and speed of the game seems to be like one of the most important, if not the most, sought after opinion, from a lot of people. And to that, I think it really depends on what your definition of whether, what makes a fast game what it is. Because MK11 overall, or MK1 I should say, I genuinely believe it's a lot faster than 11, and I don't think it's anywhere near as fast as X. However, you have to remember, this is an assist-based fighting game, and until you get comfortable with it, it is gonna feel a bit kind of clunky and not as intuitive, because this is the first time you've thrown assists on top of like a mainline Mortal Kombat game as like the main focus. And there's a few other things, right? Like forward dashing and back dashing is a bit slower by design. Down ones, like crouching pokes have more recovery by design. Like down ones having so much recovery is like immediately noticeable if you've played any of the other NetherRealm games. So I think it really depends on what kind of thing you're looking for to be smooth. Because overall, I think the movement feels decent, but it's not there yet. For me, walk speed, fantastic. I think walk speed is brilliant. The range of buttons, like overall like string recovery and stuff, you can tell that everything is designed with the idea that you can make a cameo attack follow it at any time, And I played a lot of Kano cameo, particularly with Sub-Zero, and Kano was very free-flowing, where you could kind of do like string into knife toss, and now the string has something they have to deal with. If they block, now that string becomes plus. Kano ball, which now you can delay it at any time, so you can set up throws from strings that you normally can't. And that made the game very fluid, very responsive, because you knew when you would call the assist, and you knew when the attack would connect. But when I first played the game, that was certainly not the case. When you're like fumbling the input for cameo and it's not coming out at the right time and you're calling it badly, so the cameo just gets hit and nothing happens, and it would feel unresponsive. But the second you get to that point that you get more comfortable, I think it just opens up the game tremendously. But that being said, I do genuinely think the grounded movement could use some work, because the walk speed was brilliant, but I can't remember a single time where I actually intentionally wanted to do a backdash where that was the better choice instead of just like walking back. I think it all stems down to the fact that you can't block out of a forward or backdash and you have to crouch first. It kind of adds that extra layer of mid-movement, you have to crouch, right? And it doesn't feel like much, but when you're trying to, dash into dash into dash, even if the end goal is to not have like constant wave dashing, it still feels a bit sluggish. And I think fundamental movement is what can make a game so fun to play regardless, right? Like MK9, moving is fun. MKX, if you have the running worked out, moving is fun. But for me, it's mainly MK9 is the comparison. Because like just block dashing with every character in the game is fun to do, and it feels really good. It feels really responsive. And whilst this game is there with the walking, I think the jumping fits the game well, again, considering, up block is a thing, cameos can be called whenever. I still think having truly really responsive and satisfying grounded like dash movement is important, and I don't think this version of the game was quite there yet for that.
Not quite. It's my biggest critique on the game is the fact that movement feels a lot more sluggish, and it really stems down to the dashes. If you're doing this dash crouch movement, you're actually not really covering any space. There's a lot of instances where you're trying to reposition yourself, and you've got to think about it. Why is responsive movement in fighting games important? Well, it's entirely built around you being able to play the game at a more efficient level. If you can move around a lot better, you are able to get in and out and whiff punish things, or if someone's whiffing something from like the mid screen and it's something that you want to capitalize on, you should really be able to get in there, punish them for that mistake. The issue currently with the movement is you will be closer than jump distance, someone's going to miss a move, the move is pretty punishable, this person has just made a mistake, but there are no tools at play that allows you to go in and punish that mistake, because you're dashing in, you're trying to get the punish, but you just can't get there fast enough. And I've said this a little bit, I said this a lot yesterday when I was the one doing the stream, when people were asking me about movement. What is the philosophy of this game? The philosophy is creativity and freedom for the player. Freedom, being able to do almost anything you can think of, right? And it's imagination, it's all of that rolled into one is kind of the idea of this game. You can't really move around all that much, so I kind of feel like the slightly restricted movement on the ground kind of goes against that philosophy. And again, like, I'm no designer, I'm not part of that design team, right? I'm not speaking.
Well, but that's what I mean. This is all opinion. This entire discussion we're having today is all just what we think. But to kind of add to what you're saying, but that whole kind of the whole point of the game is free flowing creativity. Do what you want when you want, right? If you can think of something, try it out, give it a go. I feel that in a lot of aspects of this game, except for grounded movement. But obviously with MK11, not to say that anything is guaranteed to change, but anyone that played the test or betas of MK11 compared to like day one, actual release version movement was night and day. Like MK11 got a pretty significant grounded movement speed increase as well, and it massively helped the game, I think, and just made the game feel a lot better. So now, maybe we'll see that change, maybe not. So
I know we don't want to sit and talk about the dashing for too long.
It is important, but yeah, it is important.
I think with it being my biggest critique is the dash movement. It's kind of hard to say how they would change that. Maybe have the dashes cover a bit more space. Maybe have more heavy on the faster on the startup end. So when you are dashing and crouching, you're covering more space. The biggest issue is that you just don't cover enough ground. Like that ultimately is the big issue with that one. But I think at the same time, it's other mobility options that I think people are talking about too, and this is where I feel we should segue into the next portion, which people are talking about jumps a lot and jumping attacks. I've seen a lot of people say that they think jumping is really terrible, and I've seen some people say jumping needs to be buffed. I've actually seen people say they think jumping needs to be stronger. Jumping in a fighting game is always meant to be an option, but it's never really supposed to be the one-size-fits-all way to move forward, right? It's very rare that jumping in is supposed to be this gigantic part of the game. Like, when you look at jumps in this game, they do not feel very threatening. Whether it's up block on the jump in, or whether it's more the fact that anti-air buttons feel incredibly powerful. Someone jumps in, you do a standing button, you turn it into a combo, you punish them for like 20-30% damage. That, I think, is done in a big part because of the jumping being quite floaty. But then you have to realize the floaty jumps, the air combat is a thing in this game, being able to back up your jump with a cameo, more often than not an ambush cameo, so you're not stuck in place, right?
Also, there's a lot of special moves that you can do in the air as well to like change your jump timing, change the arc of your jump. To like, if someone's trying to consistently anti-air, you can still throw them off timing wise. But to me, jumping is, I would say, the most extreme version in this game of what jumping in Nether or Mortal Kombat has been for a long time. The general philosophy is jump punches are easier to anti-air, but result in a standing grounded hit, so the reward is massive. Jump kicks have a higher priority against grounded anti-air buttons, but are less advantageous on hit because you knock them away and don't usually get a full combo for it, right? That's basically the idea. In this game, it is that to the maximum. Jump punches are very horizontal because the idea is you use them to start air chains. They're not as meant to be used on, like, to start grounded combos. Even though you can do it, you can start like a grounded combo off a jump punch, you're not going to be looking to do it all the time. And if you are looking for a jump punch, that's where there's like pretty much every anti-air button in the game is going to beat it for free. But if you want to beat, especially from my time playing it, whenever I was going for an anti-air standing button, my opponent was going for a jump kick. The jump kick is what would beat it. If anything was doing it, it was the kick. But then if they're going to kick, you can do the up block, right? And then get a full punish on that too. But if they know you're doing the up block, then they bait it out. So personally, I find this is kind of like the way that jumps were on paper meant to be, but like to a point that it's like kind of got the formula down, right? But it feels very, 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 very different. So it's going to take adjusting.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to look at a few fighting games where, like, there's not many games where jumping is as critical to the meta either.
Well, especially in 11, like overpowered jumping attacks was like one of the main critiques of MK11, like by far.
It was, but I mean, I look at other games where jumping can be a big part of the game, like, King of Fighters, for example, or honestly, we were playing Primal Rage at Combo Breaker. It's the same thing, but that's different because it had different kind of jumps.
Also came out 30 years ago.
A lot of the more powerful jumps in a game like that, or King of Fighters, are like the kind of almost short hop jumps, where doing that is like a really meaty, heavy button or something. So it's like, it's not common, and jump-ins in MK11 were just a bit too powerful, even with flawless block. So I am all for jumping not being that effective.
Long term, I think this is a healthier way to do jumps, but obviously time will tell, because again, jumping is something that we saw adjusted a fair few times. Like MK9, jump kicks used to be more plus, I think, and they... Oh no, was it? No, jump punches had more blocks done, and they changed it. But so, like, and then a few other games, there's been changes here and there. Like MK11 being able to flawless block a jump in made it less minus. So, like, it's one of those mechanics they've always been tweaking when a game is out, but You know, I think for a first version, this was a good way of doing it. But let's talk about the game's main feature, cameos. What are we now? We've played a lot of matches with cameo fighters. You're using a lot of Jax. I was using a lot of Kano. What are we thinking about this as an overall focus of the game? Because personally, I can see why people that have no experience with assist characters are so nervous about them, because it's a lot to take in and a lot to learn. But I think long term, cameos are going to give this game a tremendous amount of replayability, like massively so, especially competitively.
They do match the idea of the game to give the player freedom. And my favorite thing about fighting games, especially competitive fighting games, is really looking at those players that they have a character or characters that they absolutely love, and they specialize and they dedicate a lot of time to figuring things out and to provide an experience that you can't really see from any other player. I definitely get the impression that there's going to be a lot of player identity with this game, and I think the cameos are actually a huge part of that. Even in this beta, or stress test, to be honest, I really should say, because it was not a beta.
Yeah. Even
in this test, the difference the cameos gave even a single character was pretty monumental. Like, it was a pretty big deal. Like, you look at, for example, I was playing loads of Liu Kang with Jax. Liu Kang and Jax was not the most popular combination. I think actually in total, I think Sonya ended up being the most popular cameo with most of the players that I fought, and to be honest, most of the players that we saw streaming.
That's because combos, right? But that's the point. Sonya gives you combos, Sonya gives you the grounded extensions, but there's so much more than that as well, and that's like what I guess you're talking about.
But this is the level of detail that I'm already kind of enjoying, because I was watching Ninja Killer versus Sonic Fox yesterday night, and Ninja Killer still uses Sonya, and it's not just for combos, it's also for a bit more coverage on the screen. Things like a grounded fireball into a Sonya square wave to cover the airspace. If you try and jump this fireball, you get anti-aired, Ninja Killer turns it into a full combo, and then, you know, you take really big damage for it. That is something that only Sonya would be able to give you. However, the opposite end of that is she's going to give you a little bit less in the mid-screen sense outside of that sort of anti-air bait on a fireball, whereas Jax with the ground pound, that gets you to jump where the air fireballs can work or whatever else, because Liu Kang has a really good air fireball game, and then you have the unblockable ground pound stuff in the corner. But my point is that it's very, very different, and that's just two different cameos out of, I don't even know how many are going to be in the final game. You know, people can assume looking at the character selects, but even that might not be final. So to kind of go back what Mustard was saying, like, it's definitely going to be quite a big learning curve for new players and stuff like that. But it is a new game and a new experience. Everyone is very much going to be starting off at the same time. So I'm actually more interested to see what cameos do than the base characters, and it sounds really weird to even say that, but
I think it will take a while to really see it flesh out. But I'm excited for it because it's like you take one.
See how far the cameos go, man.
Well, let's just throw out a random number, right? I think on the preview there's like 16 slots for cameos, so let's say there's 16. That's 16 ways a single character can be altered and made, you know, very different. Now, let's be realistic. Not everything in the game is going to be picked. Not everything is going to be as good as each other, especially if we're talking high level competitive. Ultimately, there is going to be a best cameo, you know, for a lot of characters, right? There might be, right, okay, so Sub-Zero has no reason to not use A over B, right? And that's just inevitable. What I hope is that there is enough variety that it's not like, unquestionably, there's one cameo that half the roster is using because there's no point using anything else. You know, I just want there to be enough that the variety is there to stop things getting stale super quick. Because that's what happens in like assist-based games, right? Sometimes you'll get, you know, I mean, look at Marvel 3, right? How many teams you're going to be seeing running around with like Doctor Doom and Virgil and whatever. But then the third character you put with them can make all the difference in the world. I'm not going to say it's going to be as extreme as that, but as long as there is enough, that will be satisfying for me. But obviously it really depends, because even these three cameos were massively different with what they added. So, and we've already seen like there's Kung Lao cameo, there's a Sub-Zero, there's a Goro, there's I think they might be the only ones we've seen so far. But
the only cameos we've seen outside of this offer something very simple. The trailer that we saw that unveiled the other cameos that we know of.
Oh yeah, Striker, of course.
They didn't really show anything. We saw Striker's forward throw,
Goro's punch walk,
Goro's punch walk, and we saw like Kung Lao do a spin, which was like a summon. So that is as far as it goes. We don't know what other assists might be there. Like for all we know, Kung Lao could have like an ambush where he throws his hat and does the buzzsaw. Like that could be an ambush assist, and that would be ridiculous, right? Because that would be similar to a Kano ball in a slightly different way. So the cameo system is definitely impactful enough to the game that like it makes sense.
It is going to be out of control at launch though. There is going to be so much crazy stuff, like with the floodgates open, and every character with every cameo.
I tell you what, if there are those like mum and dad shops that break street date, there's going to be so much tech. There's going to be so much tech from the American players, you know, like you've never seen before. But I think to kind of go back to what we were talking about, the 3 cameos we had in the tests, that is it. Like, all we've seen from them is, even on a base level, actually kind of basic, if you think about it. Like, Jax gave you the wave, which, you know, kind of eliminates a few gaps in strings, but it's mostly air grab for combos, ground pound for setup and neutral. Sonya, almost exclusively combos. And then Kano, you had combo potential, but also charged Kano ball. Eye laser seemed really, really bad, so I don't really know what that's meant to do.
I cannot think a single reason you'd want to use eye laser. It just seemed not great, unless there's something I missed.
But my point is, though, on an actual base layer, all 3 of those cameos are actually pretty basic. What I'm wondering is, are we going to see other cameo characters do some rather wild stuff? Are they going to be cameo characters that can do like a buff or like...
Well, like Quan Chi cameo and he gives you spells and whatever.
Like make moves armored when they otherwise wouldn't be. Like there's a lot of possibilities, and you kind of know that NetherRealm's the kind of company to explore the wild side of their fighting games, so that there's absolutely a chance for all that. But the thing to address with them as well is the potential broken stuff they can provide. You know, this is something that I think people have been talking about, and I've seen it in chat right now. In a very short space of time, we have seen the cameos provide some rather insane possibilities.
Like Jax unblockable armor breaking, relaunchers, and Kano making unsafe, you know, overhead low mix-ups plus on block. But even, you know, so right now you can see on the video, what I've got in the background is just some replays from, like, you know, earlier today's VOD. Katana had an infinite that was discovered. Now, it's definitely one of those infinites that's, like, not officially, you know, a thing. It's, you know, it's definitely just the result of, like, an early version of the game for sure. But that kind of...
This ain't gonna be here for long.
Yeah, but that's kind of what I want to talk about, is, like, let's talk about the wild stuff. So one of the main critiques of MK11 by far was the game it's too reserved, it's too tame, it's too sensible, you know. And MKX was the exact opposite, right? Where MKX was like really extreme, crazy offense, armor everywhere, and launchers and massive combos and everything. So what potential for things like that do we think MK1 has? For like just the real crazy stuff? Because personally, I think this game could be full of it. Like, absolutely full of it.
There is a strong potential, and I feel like there's definitely going to be pressure on NetherRealm to pay very close attention to it, but also not be too... I don't want them to be too quick to adjust things either. This is the fine line of game balance and patches, especially in modern gaming where patches are a constant. Like, you know, this Infinite you're seeing in front of you right now, absolutely just a mark of, this is an early build. I guarantee this is probably not even in the game.
There has been an Infinite like this in every single pre-release NetherRealm game, so it's not going to stay.
So this is just a product of it being a super early build, and that's just that. We're talking about like the cameo stuff,
the intended stuff, right?
Yeah, the fact that you look at like Kano knives into Kenshi into 50% mid screen that can sometimes lead into Oki that has overhead low with the Sento stance. Obviously, Liu Kang and Jax, where you can end a combo in the bicycle kick, time a Jax ground pound with your neutral jump. It armor breaks, it's unblockable, and if you get it right, it can launch. Some people do suspect it could be a touch of death. Personally, we haven't got a training mode and means to thoroughly test that, so I'm
whether
not
it is or not doesn't
sure
matter.
whether
The
it is.
important thing is we're already finding stuff like 50% B&Bs into setup into like a 40% combo. We're seeing safe overhead lows. We're seeing what could potentially be like quite strong full screen options, right? Let's say a cameo gives you loads of projectiles. The point is, if you like crazy stuff, I don't see a reality that MK1 doesn't end up with tons of it, you know? And I think that's exciting from a viewer perspective, from a player perspective. Like, it's fun to do broken stuff in fighting games. Now, obviously, to a point, certain things might need patching if it's like, you know, like if we're talking straight up infinites or 100% combos that take like no effort whatsoever, like all the usual stuff. But I genuinely think this game could be up there with like some of the most creative and entertaining offense that we've seen in a very long time. Very, very, very long time.
I mean, it's kind of one of those it almost gives the impression of, oh, you said MK11 didn't have enough options and combos and everything else, where here comes a million different things you can do. So it could not be any more different from its previous game. That's absolutely for sure. But to kind of go back to what I was saying, you kind of hope that NetherRealm aren't going to be too quick to change things. If something is obviously really broken and there's no way out of it and this and that, obviously that's a different story. But in a game like this that has so many options, and I don't even want to think about the stuff we're going to see on launch when you have a full roster of characters and cameo fighters, you always get worried sometimes that something's going to get found and used and people are going to absolutely scream that it has to be taken out of the game instantly before it's even been fully figured out, you know, either in training mode or, more importantly, in a competitive space, whether it's online, whether it's in tournament. I hope things don't get removed or super nerfed into the ground before they've had even a little bit of time to breathe and see what options there are. Because sometimes, and this is not every time, in finding solutions to stuff that people have trouble with can actually sometimes reshape the meta of a game. It can sometimes make you a miles better player, like because it requires this to be done that people hadn't really thought of in the past. I'm trying to think of a few examples, but I'm sure there's a bunch of them. But my point is that people like stuff removed if they instantly take a dislike to it. That doesn't always mean it should go or should be totally nerfed into the ground. And it can
ultimately it boils down to just because something is strong doesn't mean it needs to be nerfed. You know, and that's just it's a very modern gaming opinion to be like, you know, I don't like this thing, I'm going to complain about it until it gets taken out or whatever. And I just hope there's not as much of that unless it truly is something that has to go. But moving on to a different aspect of the game, I think. Well, we think like character variety, right? Because again, like one thing we can see in certain games, and even MKX at its like brand new freshness was a little bit guilty of this, where some characters, I don't want to say they were very like homogenous, where they kind of played very similar to each other, but MK11 did have a lot of like quote unquote mid-screen footsies characters, right? And MKX had a lot of overhead low. That's kind of the game plan. Not to say that everyone was exactly the same, but you definitely got the impression that characters were built with a similar idea in mind. I didn't really get that with MK1, and I know that's because cameos change a lot, but like what Sub-Zero was doing was nothing like Kenshi, who was like a true puppet character, which they've never done before. Liu Kang was probably the closest to like an existing version where he's very similar to 11, but even then was nothing like the others. Katana, completely different. Like all four of the characters, honestly, it was almost like, you know, the way in Injustice that characters are designed very different from each other, like extremely so. Not that I think that's the only comparison to Injustice I can even make in this game, is how the characters seemingly are meant to be nothing alike whatsoever. That's the vibe I got from this, and I think that especially with assists on top, that can work really well. in the long run, if there is enough variety. Because even look at something like Street Fighter 6. Street Fighter 6 doesn't have a gigantic roster on day one, but it's not lacking in options. You know what I mean? Like, that game has, like, what, 18 characters? But it's 18 characters that play nothing alike. And that makes the game feel so much more fleshed out, and even though it's so early, developed because of that. And again, when you're talking playable characters and then cameo characters, again, all I see is replay value and something that's going to keep you playing for a long time. And if they do want to stick to going away from the 2-year cycle, and this is a game we're going to be having for the next, like, 4 or 5 years, if the variety is there, I can see it.
As long as the variety is there is a big one, because with a game like this, I would absolutely love to see all kinds of different archetypes. I have seen people say in the past, and I have not seen the interview myself, so please don't quote me, and I am sorry if I'm misrepresenting anyone, but I'm sure someone, I think it might have been at Summer Game Fest, there was an interview where someone said, basically every archetype is going to be in this game in some capacity. Now, I don't think that's specified.
Suhao Grappler
roster.
Incoming?
Yeah, I don't think it's specified cameo or base roster, but, like, I really want to see those archetypes go a little bit deeper, because, you know, outside of something like Solomon Grundy in the very first Injustice, we've never really had like a true absolute grappler in Mortal Kombat, right? Like,
not in a traditional sense, yeah, but
Grundy's not even Mortal Kombat, he's Injustice. But my point is, like, in modern NetherRealm games, we haven't really seen grapplers. So, like, in a game like this, that would be absolutely, like, super cool to me. But I definitely agree with what you're saying there, is that the characters. Can we, let's kind of just weigh up the 4 characters, and our first impressions is that Sub-Zero seemed to have strong defensive play because of the clone, and Ice Clone, yeah, it's not up for very long, but it kind of keeps you protected from...
No, I think Sub was the most versatile. That's what I got. You know, good projectile, good built-in mix-up options, reliable mids and good buttons, great pokes, combo options that don't rely on a cameo, right? Good meterless use, good meter use at the same time. Like, Sub-Zero definitely felt like a bit of a jack of all trades, and then you put someone like Kano on top of it, you're going to make him insane. But that's what I mean, you know, Liu Kang, different enough in the sense that the Fireball game was legit because of, like, air Fireball, grounded Fireball was really fast, but still very stagger heavy thanks to the strings, very familiar. Kenshi, oh my god, let's talk about Kenshi for a minute. That gives me so much confidence in the future of this game's cast.
I really wanted to play Kenshi this weekend, but with just how complicated the Sento stance was, I went into the test thinking, well, I'll just try and play a basic game of Kenshi and maybe I'll learn the Sento stuff. The second I started to see, like, Sonic Fox's combos and stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, this damage is way too high to ignore. And without a training mode, I'm definitely the kind of player that really can't... I can't get my head around that stuff unless I can sit in training mode and just practice it over and over and over. So definitely wasn't able to play Kenshi, but what I saw of the character I was thoroughly impressed by. I know that definitely went either way. From a viewership perspective, I think a lot of people really enjoyed seeing Kenshi. A lot of the players, especially that fought those that had mastered as much as they could of the puppet mode already, didn't really enjoy fighting it. You know, the chip damage was incredibly high. The true mix-ups that would loop into themselves, and you've got these really cool high damaging full combos that, to be fair, probably some of the highest execution we've seen in a very long time, but at high level,
it says a lot.
Really factor in execution.
It says a lot when you're seeing, like, high 40% meterless and it isn't unanimously met with that's broken, take it out. A lot of us that saw it were like, yo, to be fair, that's, like, really hard. Like, most people can't do it, which I know is always a different discussion. Like, you know, do you factor in execution and whether something should stay or go or whatever? But in this instance, I don't think they've ever created a character more difficult than Kenshi in this game.
At least on a first level. The reason Sonic Fox was able to make this work so well is because Sonic Fox has, you know, over a decade of fighting game experience in loads of different games, and some of those games have puppet characters that control in a similar way. So, like, there are people that have played nothing but NetherRealm games, and that is going to feel not even like the same game from an execution
Mate, I've been
standpoint.
playing fighting games for over a decade, and I felt like a fish out of water trying Kenshi out. Even in like single player ladders, I've never played a puppet character in any game, and I was like, how do you do this? like what am I doing? How does this work? And then I'm watching like Fox and like anyone else that's trying the character out, and they're just doing all this crazy stuff, and I'm just like, I can't handle it. I cannot process it. I'll enjoy watching that character, but that is not a character I'm going to be able to play unless I really do the homework. But the point is, knowing they're trying new things that are so out of the norm, I think, by like Mortal Kombat's as of late. I mean, I'm just thinking, who else is like that? What other characters have they been cooking up that are gonna have like crazy things like that with like huge execution, really high skill gap, and like just things they've not tried before, right? Because clearly they've got the confidence to do it. And Kenshi wasn't like falling apart at the seams. If anything, the character was a bit overtuned, right? Like it wasn't like you put in all that work and the character sucks. Like it was a good balance. And I just can't wait to see what other characters in the game they have, and if anything like that exists as well.
And that's just like 4 characters, so there's plenty more. I think the final point on characters was discussion over Kitana, probably. A lot of people mentioned that they think that Kitana wasn't that great or that she was lacking. The problem is, when it comes to discussing Kitana's viability in a modern game, is that you kind of have to take that with a pinch of salt, because sadly, in my opinion, Kitana has been downplayed for a very long time in a lot of different games, you know. And like that's not to say that there's some truth to some of the weaknesses that she has in some of the games. Like MK11 I think was quite a big example of that, though, where some players want to play a character a certain way and they can't, and they want the patches to completely shift into how I want to play the character, not how they actually are played. You know, a big thing there being trying to meaty with the button that can whiff really easily if they get hit out of it, or you can whiff punish it and that. And it's like, well, just don't use that button. And you almost had the impression of, well, no, I want to press that button. It's like, yeah, but you want to, but you can't. It's a different character. It's a different idea. I'm a bit wary in MK1 because, you know, you get the impression that it might be a similar idea, but then at the same time, like, I'd seen some Kitana players in this build do some really cool stuff. Like, I think I was just watching Foxy's Twitch and checking out some of the clips. Some of the Kano stuff that she has with, like, setting up a really, really meaty trap that you can throw them into and turn it into a full combo. And it's like, Sub-Zero can't throw you into his ice clone, but Kitana can throw you into her fan trap on the floor. And it's like, that's just with 3 days of experience. So I think she's the character that has the biggest discussion over viability, because what everyone else could do was quite apparent. But I kind of get the impression that Kitana would just take a little bit more time, you know, because I didn't look at that character and think this character's terrible.
I was genuinely thinking to myself, is this actually a case where Kitana might actually be as bad as everyone's saying? And then I saw that clip of like a normal B&B ended in that new like launching trap she's got, a throw onto it, and then even on like throw tech it combos and like launches the opponent. And I'm immediately thinking like MKX, the amount of characters like, you know, Grandmaster is like throwing you onto a clone, and that is now instant offense, throwing onto a Cyrax bomb, throwing onto anything like that, right? And the second I'm seeing characters do that, I'm like, okay, cool. Give this character some time, and every touch is going to be okay, cool, set play now. Because I've hit you, I'm putting a trap on the screen. You have to guess what I'm going to do, and even if you guess right, you might still get launched. And that's like, you loop that into itself again. And if you can turn that situation into like higher damage because of a cameo, maybe there's a cameo that makes it even easier. Like, you see what I'm saying, right? Like, I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface of what some of these characters are doing.
That's the big talking point, though, is that we've only had access to 3 cameos in this build, and it's very clear that the right cameo can totally transform a character. And that really is the big takeaway, talking about character viability. 'Cause also, I mean, the big thing being like early build, right? Like the amount of early build.
Like, does balance even matter when we're talking like an online test, when the whole point of it was to test the online? And like,
all I'm saying is, I saw all 4 characters doing stuff. You know, I saw really wild Sub-Zero combos where you can loop multiple freezes, which, to be fair, actually, I'm not particularly sure the multiple ground freezes will stay. But, you know, I was seeing overhead low mix-ups into plus on block because of Kano Knife, and on hit you can turn it into like 40+% damage, into corner carry, into clone, into sit behind the clone and do the clone charge.
Yeah, every character was doing crazy stuff.
Yeah, like with Liu Kang, I was seeing wild fireball game. I was seeing whiff punishment. I was seeing huge combos. I was seeing corner combos
50% one bar.
You know, we're looking at Kenshi and all that wild Sento stance stuff where it's very similar, but, you know, again, insanely good. And then with Katana, we started to see a lot of the Kano into the setup, into the fan trap on the floor, into the grab. Like, I was seeing all 4 of these characters doing pretty insane stuff, right? So I'm just like, we'll keep an open mind on it, and so I guess observe as the builds improve and change, and we see more characters and more cameos.
So we should talk about it for a minute because it is important, even though it's something that I'm sure will change, but we can't ignore it. The online of the stress test. Now, here's the thing. I get the impression, genuinely, that because this stress test was so soon after the gameplay reveal, they must have known there were going to be issues, and that's the whole reason that this test existed, right? Because they announced the beta at launch, and then the stress test was announced at, like, Combo Breaker, I think, and then a few weeks later, the stress test is here, you know? But the online was probably the most unstable thing I've experienced in an online NetherRealm game since MKX had the big netcode, you know, overhaul that basically fixed the online forever and ever. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not like an engineer. I don't do code or anything like that. So I can't explain as to why anything's happening. But it was certainly not a great online experience. The stability wasn't there. A lot of matches, near enough every set I played at some point disconnected, either immediately or after many games. Generally speaking, obviously the build was missing a lot of fundamental features like no ping counter in game. No like on Xbox it didn't even have like an icon for wired play. It was just showing wireless even if you were playing on wired. But the main thing was just the overall stability of the online it left a lot to be desired. But I kind of get that must have been the whole point of the test. So hopefully by the next time we see an online test, whether it's the beta, whether they do something else, maybe they talk about crossplay, maybe they do stuff like that. Hopefully it's better, because it was not a great online experience.
It was the point of the test, though. I think there's really not much else that can be said about it, because when the disconnects happen, I think it happened for almost everyone playing the game, which is clearly a server thing.
Yeah,
and it's the online stress test. It was the name. It was the name of the product, and that's what it was there to do.
If the next online play mode has the same problem, I'll be concerned, but I'm sure it won't.
Yeah, you never know with these things, and even then, pre-release is always pre-release. So that's all you can really do in that point. I think outside of that, there's a lot more to talk about, and I think we'll try and rewind and talk about what we liked and didn't like.
We're not going to be here for like 3 hours, chat. Don't worry. But obviously, there's a lot to cover.
Here's something that I would like to discuss: fatal blows.
Or just returning mechanics in general, I think.
I'd say that, but the big one for me is definitely fatal blow. Fatal blows were still very annoying on block. Now, fatal blows do not reward a player anywhere near as much as they did in 11. They do not have the almost instant armor. So, mashing it on wake up or whatever else pretty much just never worked. I never got hit by a random fatal blow once in all 3 days. And,
no, me neither.
You can definitely tell you were fighting some people that played a lot of MK11 and it was in their muscle memory to try and do it, but it never worked. So they're definitely mechanically not as good as they were in MK11. Nowhere near. And even then, some of them are so fast to start up that it doesn't even feel like there's a chance for armor to activate, so you just stuff them when people try and mash them. Outside of that, I think Liu Kang's has quite a long startup, and it does have armor, but it feels like the armor activates kind of like halfway through. My problem with them is that they are still too safe.
The pushback seemed way more than even at the worst of MK11's like Fatal Blow pushback.
It was a large critique for Mortal Kombat 11 for a lot of players. Also, by the way, thank you very much, Kerbalicious. Hopefully you had a good time with the stress test, mate, and we appreciate that raid very much. We're just quickly talking about our thoughts on the game, right? Our thoughts on the game in its current state. Now we've played for about 3.5 days, and we're currently talking about Fatal Blows. So what I was just saying is, I understand that Fatal Blows are weaker here, and I'm very, very, happy with that. But
they were quite irritating for me, even though I was playing Sub-Zero and I could like you can always do a slide punish, right? But that's not really the same. It's if they've got their super, their comeback mechanic is there. They've used it wrong. You've blocked it. You want to punish them for it. Again, but that's one thing that if they had this pushback, but forward dashing was a bit smoother, you could just dash up and punish, right? So if you had the execution to get a quick dash, you could do it. But I still think it's a step in the right direction, though, because the freeze frame startup and then the armor not being active until after the freeze frame has even happened, that was great. The freeze frame was brilliant. And the fact that you can break them, there were so many instances that I got hit with a bit of a Hail Mary fatal blow off a single button or an individual option. But boom, I could break it. And that was it. And then I won the round. They didn't get that as a kind of quick way back in. They still had to look for it properly. But my only main issue was the pushback, and it was a constant thing, yes. But I still think it's a step in the right direction, but it's not 100% there to my liking, personally.
It was quite a few steps in the right direction. Like I said, I'm not going to repeat myself too much, sure. But there's a lot changed that makes it not as strong, so I'm definitely here for that. And they still do really good damage, so if you actually do hit a fatal blow, it makes sense. But I just... For a move like that, with the damage they yield, they just have to be more unsafe. It feels needless that they are as almost safe as they are, that you have to resort to really fast but low damage punish options. But also kind of harder to test as well without
training, right? Because you can't just set someone to do it and boom, test what buttons will reach or whatever it is. But
now, actually, so we're talking about fatal blows, and I actually seen in chat. Someone was asking, can you break them? Yes, and it actually brings us on to combo breakers, I think.
Yeah,
got a lot to say about
and meter breakers in general. I love meter in this game. So combo breakers require 3 bars and your cameo to be there, but your cameo has to be usable. If your cameo gets hit and then is out of action for 5 or 6 seconds, that's 5 or 6 seconds you can't break. But generally speaking, when I put this on Twitter, when I first saw that breakers cost 3 bars, I was like, is that a bit too much? Are we going to see 1 breaker in a match and that's basically it? Is it ever going to be worth it to break or just eating the damage? You build so much meter in this game. So much. You build meter through all the usual MK9 and X means, right? Doing special moves, dealing chip damage, taking damage, but even dealing damage in this game gives you bar. Your cameo doing everything gives you bar. You have non-stop bar, and you build so much meter getting hit. If you get hit by a fatal blow, it gives you an entire chunk of bar. I checked that. If you get hit by I don't know if that's universal, but if you get hit by a fatal blow, you are rewarded with an entire chunk of meter for it. So you have so much meter. You're always using EX. You can break, I'd say, once a round if you use it right. I loved that. I really, really enjoyed that about the game, that you felt like you had it all the time. It wasn't like, okay, I've broken, so I can't do anything else now for the rest of the game. Because you'd have another bar before you know it.
I'd seen people say, I feel like they should go back to the 2-bar breaker system. The thing about that is you build meter in this game so quickly that if breaking combos cost you the old school 2 bars of meter, you would almost never
You'd break twice around. Every round.
Yeah. The combo breakers would be super, super common, and I feel like they would just ruin the pace of the game, because anytime you would actually hit someone with something, you'd finally hit a combo, and they'd probably just break it every time. You look at a high-level match, a lot of moves are going to get blocked, a lot of projectiles are going to get blocked if you don't flawless block them. Cameo assists, let's not forget cameos build a lot of meter as well. You would never see combos, and as a 3D Mortal Kombat player, where it would give you a breaker, in 3D Mortal Kombat, Deception and Armageddon, you'd get given a combo breaker, 3 of them at the start of the game, and they were yours to spend however you wanted. The thing about that is, you almost never got a big combo against someone in those games, because the moment you hit them with something substantial that would turn into a giant combo, they would break it every time. And because that game was kind of fast, it didn't feel good. it was actually probably my biggest critique on a mechanical level for those 3D games, is that they were unsatisfying because the second you hit someone, they always had a breaker, and it sucked because of it. Like, those games were fun, but that was a huge issue I had with them.
Well, you also have to remember as well, like, yes, you break with your super meter in this game, but at the same time, the cameo is another resource to be spent to build bar as well. So, like, you can spend everything on a breaker and not be out of options because you just use your cameo instead, right? Use your cameo to get a combo, use your cameo to build more up, and vice versa. Like, you always have something. You know, you feel like you have resources to make something happen. One issue I do have, though, with the HUD, I feel like the HUD is a bit too small. And we're talking about meters and stuff like that. I think it's relevant for super meter. A lot of players I fought against in the test didn't break. I think it's because they didn't know it was a mechanic. Because even right now, if you're looking at the screen, if this is how it goes on YouTube, look at the chunks in the bottom right. This player could break that entire time and chose not to. If that was the last round, obviously they would have just lost outright. But in MK9, there's 3 chunks of bar, and above each chunk there is an icon to show you what you can spend it on. 1 chunk shows an EX icon, 2 chunks shows a breaker icon, 3 shows an X-ray icon. So you have that visual information for what you can do it with, whereas in this game, there's nothing of the sort. You know, the cameo meter, very small, hard to see sometimes. The health bar is fine, it's up there, but everything is very small, and it's kind of like a minimal, like almost like a minimalist approach, which I think looks clean, but it's not clear enough. It doesn't give you the information that a lot of players will need, especially if we're talking like new players who are gonna be needing to have that kind of visual indicator. Because even in like MKX and 11 and stuff, when you were standing near a background interaction, a symbol would appear on the screen to show you could do that. I think it's still important to have stuff like that, and this game will need that too, just for the sake of the casual players, so they don't just eat a 50% combo that they could have broke but didn't know breaker was a thing because there was nothing on screen to tell them that it was there, you know?
So we've talked about quite a few things. We've talked about the movement, we've talked about the characters, the cameo system, and a little bit of online. Not that it really matters as much, because that's the purpose of this test, is to test the stability of the servers.
So I think we should talk just general quality of life. Because I think
I think so too. I got a couple of things that bothered me about it.
I think a lot of moves. You go ahead. You go ahead.
I don't want to get too hung up on all the negatives, because there was a lot that we enjoyed as well. But there was definitely something that really bothered me in this game, and it sounds really silly, but there's actually a thing in this game where you can lose your cameo, and it doesn't really make sense why you did. What I mean by that is, there are instances in this game where a character is going to throw a fireball at you, or a projectile. It goes over your head, it leaves the screen, you call your cameo in to then go, right, I've ducked this projectile, I'm now going to do some kind of ambush attack, and I'm going to go in for an attack of my own. Because the cameo assist has to run in from behind you, the projectile
out of camera shot too.
The projectile is not in camera shot, but the cameo, when you summon it, it almost feels like you've spawned the cameo on the projectile, and frame 1, they get hit, and you've lost it for 6 seconds. Now, I don't know what they could do to change that, and by all means, that could be an intentional thing, but it feels really silly, and I don't really understand why it happens. More often than not, what happens is, you're like, wait, where did my cameo go? I've dodged this projectile, it's not on the screen anymore. I've called in my cameo, and he's just disappeared, and it's gone for 6 seconds. Like, that one small little thing was really irritating, and I mean, if it's something that's just a part of the game, obviously, yeah, you'll just learn to wait a split second before calling in your cameo, and you'll just learn to live with it. But I'm not sure if that was completely intentional or not.
I think if it is intentional, that it really wouldn't have to have some kind of like sound cue to go along with it, and that's not the only thing that I think would benefit from that. Like, I saw TQT make a really good suggestion on Twitter for up block. So up block as a mechanic, I really enjoy it. I love the dynamic of it and the kind of the mind games it gives to the jumping. However, as someone that did a lot of up block, I think some kind of sound effect to indicate that you have done a successful up block would go a long way to helping you realize you've done it and can now move forward and take your punish. And that kind of instance is the same thing. Just more information, some kind of cue that it has happened. And also, if we're talking like accessibility as well, you know, for players with you know, some kind of, you know, disability, that is the kind of thing that helps as well. You know, you really can't go wrong with more information, especially if you could turn it on or off, whatever. But for me as well, I think some moves could use like a bit of a cleanup in terms of like the downtime. You know, and I think that's one thing that kind of, you know, people saying the game feels slow to them, or, you know, it feels a bit clunky, whatever. There are certain animations and certain attacks that just have a bit more... I guess they just have too much downtime. Like Kano forward throw, like a few of the cameo forward throws, in fact. You do the forward throw, and then there's just like a second or two of nothing before players can start, you know, moving again, and it just felt really clunky. Like Kano forward throw was particularly bad for that, where the forward throw animation itself took about 6 or 7 seconds, but about 2 of those seconds was just nothing happening, right? Like the throw is finished, and your character's just standing there while you wait for them to stand up, you know? Which I wasn't huge on.
Didn't notice that as much with Jax, because Jax definitely feels a little bit faster in that respect, and being able to meet a burn. I do love, speaking of up block, I do very much love that you throw someone, like, actually look at we can see, the grab there. There's a good 2 or 3 seconds there, maybe not 3, where Kano does the grab and there's just nothing happening. But
there's a fair few attacks that have that kind of like strange downtime to them, when it feels like, right, boom, let's get back to the action. And you're just not getting back to it fast enough because of stuff like that. And it's hard to describe and without giving like constant examples, but, you know, I mean, I guess it helps if you're waiting for like cameos to recharge and come back, but, you know, overall, if we're talking pace of the game and kind of fluid feeling, it's
what I was definitely saying though before I got a little bit sidetracked by the forward throw is throwing someone out of an up block, having the grab do more damage is a really cool feature.
I like that.
You know, I'm a biased Jax player, but playing as Jax, empty jumping someone who does up block and then throwing their up block for 35% unbreakable damage is actually pretty cool. And again, that is very much just in a sense of like one character. You know, I'm fairly confident that Jax isn't going to be the only cameo that has a damage-wise powerful throw, but it does make sense to give Jax that, you know, above everyone else. So that layer could become quite interesting. We didn't really get to see much of up block outside of just punishing a jump in.
Speak for yourself. I used it all the time.
No, that's what I mean. Like, we only ever really saw up block used to punish a jump, but we know that it has more applications than that. I'm kind of waiting to see.
The only overhead it could have beat was Sub-Zero's back 2, and that was unsafe anyway. Then again, I wonder if you up block his overhead with like a Kano knife behind it, does it then make it punishable? I don't know.
Well, what I'm saying is, like, if you can up block in the middle of stuff, maybe that'll work. Because like, if you can block a string that has an overhead ender and you can up block it,
Apparently you can flawless block individual hits in the middle of a block string in this game as well, and that's another thing. I really liked flawless block in this game. For me, this is how flawless block should be, and that's it. You know, it's not like a front row mechanic that you're going to see non-stop, but when you do need it, it's there in a way that doesn't completely break the game. You know what I mean? Like getting no attacks out of it, just nullifying that chip, making yourself a bit more safe. Yes, some attacks will change frame data when you flawless block, but you know, when you can throw cameos behind them, how much could that possibly matter? Like, I really liked flawless block in this game. I think flawless block was done exactly as it should have been done overall. I really enjoyed it.
I don't miss the attacks out of flawless block. I can tell you that much. I do not miss it. I do like the change to pokes. I think it's still going to take a bit of time to figure out, but you really cannot mash the same way in this game that some people had in previous titles. Absolutely. Like, I hadn't fought a single player here in 3.5 days.
Down one into down one is dead. Like, poke into poke is dead.
Basically mash just to save yourself on block. Maybe it's because I was playing Liu Kang, who had like really good confirmable mids, but I did not experience much mashy play. I do not think it's going to work as well.
No, I had plenty of people trying it, but plenty of people that swiftly lost, unfortunately, because it is not a thing.
Yeah, I've seen people like, I'm not calling out MK11 in particular, but you could definitely tell what players were used to playing.
Oh, mate, MKX had its fair share of 6-3. You remember Kotal Khan down one on MKX?
Oh no, MKX had loads of down one mashes, but it was the combination of players that would mash loads of low pokes, like out of desperation, but would then also neutral duck all the time and look for down two mashes, and that is really. Yeah, I understand, because look, MK11's been out for 4 years, so there's going to be a lot of muscle memory that are hard to unlearn in 3 days. But
I definitely down-2'd a lot of whiffed throws.
But you can tell in this game though, absolutely, that stuff just, it's a different game. That stuff will not work the same way. There's still going to be scrubby options, like there is in every game, stuff that people will do where you're like, I can't believe you're doing that. It's going to exist, but at least in this build, really did not.
I will say,
Aaron.
I do like the way pokes work, because like down 4s across the board were really good. I think down 4 will be like the god poke for most characters in this game. Like down 4s were fantastic. However, down 1s on hit, like mid juggle, did feel really slow. But that could just be muscle memory into something that you shouldn't be doing in this game.
They're not intended to be used that way, I suppose.
I guess it's just not meant for it. But that's the only thing about pokes that felt weird to me, was like down 1s on hit in like a juggle. But I think that's probably just a case of doing something in the wrong game, where like it worked before, isn't something you should do here. You just have to teach yourself to not do it. But yeah, overall, but like not to cover like every single tiny aspect of the game, but armor, wake-ups, generally speaking, what are we thinking?
Very, very easy to break, but then also I played Liu Kang, so I don't know if I have much of an opinion on the matter. I do think that armored launcher into cameo assist, you and I theorized that before we even had hands-on with the test, that you could probably do some armored moves into an assist to make it launch, and thanks to Sonya's square wave and Sub-Zero's armored slide, that has been confirmed. You can do armored moves into an assist to get some kind of combo or extra damage. The damage on it, though, did not seem very high. Whenever I saw a Sub-Zero player do a armored slide into Sonya square wave, they would use sometimes both square waves. It didn't really do a lot of damage for the resources that you spent. So I don't know if there is some scaling there. I don't know if that it was just a Sub-Zero specific option, but yes, armored launchers do exist, but it seems to cost quite a lot of resources. So I'm going to be kind of reserved about that. But also, 4 characters here. Liu Kang had a double hitting up close button. I feel like he's not going to be the only character that has something like that.
Oh, so definitely not.
Good armor up close.
Kung Lao always does. Kung Lao will have some button that just hits like a million times.
It just doesn't feel as scary in this game. All of the armored moves you could get hit by in this game were either single hits or tiny damage. Yes, Sub-Zero can slide into Sonya, but even that didn't hurt too much from what I could see. So armor doesn't seem all that broken, and the armor seems very unsafe and beta.
I'm also not surprised to see armor come back in this game of all games, because when you're throwing cameo attacks and there's like a lot of offense, like that's the kind of game where you either need push block or you need armor. So I'm not surprised to see that the game has armor at the very least, even though it is quite easy to break it. But also, due to the lack of like built-in wake-up options, right? There's one type of delay wake-up. You can wake up with armor, or and obviously some summon cameos. Like the only summon cameos I saw work as reliable wake-ups was Jack's wave and Sonya leg grab. Like those are the only 2 ones that were, I think, usable, because Kano's laser was too slow, but I think that's going to be like a cameo to cameo thing. But meaties, oh my god, it felt good to do reliable meaties again. Like every time you knock someone down, you can do a meaty. They ain't going to roll through you. They ain't going to squeeze out a wake up 6 frame. Like you can meaty properly, and it felt so good.
And that's just the nature of a game like this that's going to have very oppressive up close options. It's MK11, and I'm not going to constantly make the comparison there,
I mean, it is the comparison people are going to be making. There's no avoiding it.
It's hard not to, because it was the last game, and that last game was around for 4 years, right? So there are going to be comparisons in that. I think one of the biggest critiques, and again, I feel like a lot of this game feels like it stems from them listening to the critique from the previous game. And a lot of what we experience in this game is based on what people disliked about the previous installment, and I think the wake up options again are a very similar take from that, because let's look at one of the main things people disliked about 11. Too many wake up options. Yes, it cost resources, but at the end of the day, you had wake up 3, up 2, you had delayed wake up,
too many
forward, you could roll back. It was difficult to rush someone down. Like you get someone on the floor and it felt like you weren't always the one actually in control. You knock an opponent on the floor in a fighting game, it's really meant to be you're the one in control now. That's just how it's been. And MK11, that very much wasn't really the case, because they could get a wake-up option that didn't cost them a huge amount, and then they're going to full combo punish you, and then you're dead. It's way more limited here, but the wake-up options that exist, I understand why they exist.
They serve their purpose.
Without armor on wake-up in this game, you'd never get up. Like it would be absolutely kind of just whoever gets hit first and has really good pressure. It's going to be real like versus fighting game stuff, but without having it actually.
I'll tell you what kind of move will be extremely powerful. Like if Johnny Cage has like invulnerable nut punch reversal, like that kind of reversal would be insane. Like it makes you wonder if it's going to be armor only, or if there are going to be some characters that have invincibility, like Cage usually gets.
Or if there are characters that have armor and then you can extend into launch. We haven't seen that yet, but remember that was a thing in Mortal Kombat X. Some characters had invincible moves, smoke evade, the EX nut punch in Hollywood Cassie, I think it was.
Yeah, stuff like that.
There might be characters in this game that have an armored move and you can spend a second bar to launch it. We already know that some moves, I think, was it Sub-Zero's EX Ice Clone cost 2?
Yeah, Sub-Zero Clone EX was 2, but I couldn't find any uses for it. Like, you look at it on paper and it's like, there's got to be something broken, but I couldn't find it. Not yet. But yeah, the point is some moves cost more than 1 to EX.
But it's pretty safe so far. And we have to keep saying so far, because this is a build with 4 characters and 3 cameos, and it's early days. So it's kind of like what we're saying could be totally invalidated by, a couple of extra characters that we end up seeing that have moves that we'd never really thought of in the past or whatever else. So keep an open mind is what I'm trying to say to you folks.
Well, one thing I'll say, as I think we kind of come to an end of this, honestly, I think we've kind of covered all the most important things I imagine we might need to. But the one main thing that it all kept coming back to me was, it's a fun game. This is a game that I was able to play for about 7-8 hours each stream, and it did not feel like it. You know what I mean? I just kept wanting to play, queue up. And I don't even have any of my favorite characters yet. You know what I mean? Like, who even knows what the final roster is going to be? I want to see, like, 3D era characters. I want to see, like, proper, like, the whole franchise represented. But if anything else, just on a gameplay level alone, this has been a very good at-home first experience of the online of the game, the actual gameplay itself.
I'm gonna miss not having access to it. Like, I know this test. I know the purpose of this test was to simply test the online stability, right? I totally get that. But I played it for 3.5 days, and I had the time of my life, and now it's gone, and that makes me.
It'll be a long couple months.
But, yeah, it really will. But it will be, hopefully, a period that's going to be full of, announcement trailers.
Combat casts and trailers and all sorts.
Please give us the combat casts.
Well, they have announced that it's playable at EVO, and they've done so under the guise of it being the first time the general public can play it. So I can't imagine we'll see it at any like conventions or anything through July. But who knows? Let's just watch this space and keep up with what's going on. But for the sake of YouTube, and obviously those of you watching us here on Twitch, thank you very much for hanging out. Is there anything we needed to add, Ryan, that you think we've forgotten? I don't think so.
You know what? The second we stop doing this, I'm sure I'm going to remember a few things, but I guess there's some points to really bullet point right near the end. A really, really fun and new experience, but not without critique, not without areas that we'd definitely like to see tweaked from a quality.
The main one is grounded movement. That's it. The main critique I have is grounded movement for like dashes and...
Yeah, grounded movement is probably our biggest complaint, and that's something that we'd like to see changed a little bit, just so it can kind of fit the creativity that the rest of the game provides. Outside of that, I think fatal blows a little bit less pushback and making them more unsafe on block would be appreciated, but they're definitely weaker than they were in 11 anyway. And outside of that, it's really the kind of game that I thoroughly enjoy. A lot of options and a lot of room to make a certain way of playing your own. That's something that I love in fighting games, and I love watching specialists do their thing. I'm very much the kind of player that likes to pick the characters I like and ignore tier lists. I use who I want regardless. This is the kind of game that, with the right cameo or the right character combination, especially if no one else is using it, it's a very satisfying experience.
There's going to be a lot of potential for that too, because there are going to be some character and cameo combinations that completely go under the radar for a long time.
yeah, I wonder how much stuff is going to be there from day one that doesn't get discovered until months and months later, maybe even a year. You know,
I hope lots.
The innovator will have a lot of fun in this game. You know, you look at someone like Foxy or Sonic Fox, and these are the kind of players that very.
I want to see what character someone like Biohazard's going to play. You know, Bio was playing Kano, Baraka, Shiva, and MK11. Like, remember that was it Bone Picker, the command grab, like Leap Baraka we saw loads of times. Someone like Bio with this much like selection, can't wait to see it.
I mean, not to make my outro too long, but yeah, just overall though, a thoroughly enjoyable and, as I said, new experience. I really thought this was going to play like one of the old games, but it doesn't. It frankly does not. It is a brand new thing to crack open, and it's the kind of game that I'm just going to get absorbed by, I think, because there's just so much to find. You know, I love finding cool stuff and playing a character that I like that maybe no one else is really using, and just having that own personal discovery. It's a huge part of fighting games for a lot of people, and this game kind of has all the ingredients to be that. I'm very excited actually to see what tournament players like. We were watching Sonic Fox versus Ninja Killer last night, and even that set between the two of those was like unbelievably fun to watch. And that's just two players.
Which you can watch it on YouTube already, by the way. I'm fairly sure both Ninja and Sonic Fox have uploaded it on their channels.
Yeah, they put it on YouTube already. So go watch that. It's great.
But yeah, chat, that's going to be it from us. So for YouTube, thank you very much for tuning in. Do feel free to, of course, let us know your opinions in the comments. You know, what you liked, what you disliked. Just all the above, really. Thank you very much for hanging out with us. I do hope you've enjoyed this little discussion of ours. I say little, it was probably quite long, but I mean, we do tend to waffle on a bit, don't we? So, yeah, do stay tuned.
We talk for a living. It's what we do.
Well, of course, as and when there's anything to talk about with MK1, whether it's character trailers, combat casts, information, future playtests, whatever happens, we'll be covering all of it to the best of our ability. So thank you very much for tuning in. Do take care of yourselves, and we will see you next time. Peace.